Hey reader, this is Centaur. Welcome back to the channel, and today we are taking a look at the pre-open beta release version of the Marauder and seeing how well it has translated from the RTS game and into the tabletop miniatures game. Now, as a quick reminder, we'll be doing a full unit review again once the game goes live in probably circa March or so. This is just from what we've seen so far, looking at the cards from Eschenspiel, the open beta release cards that were released on the Facebook page couple days before the AMA dropped that mentioned that people were going to be getting into open beta circa within the next week or so, which is kind of fun and exciting. And so, as a quick reminder to everybody who's watching, nothing from the open beta, nothing from the from the portal and things like that is going to be spoiled here. Okay, this is completely spoiler free. Everything that's been said and that's going to be reviewed here is stuff that is openly available online via the Facebook page and other stuff. So no need to worry. I again want to preserve people having some fun and discovering things for themselves once they are in the beta themselves. Okay, that's important to me. So we're going to be looking at stats, special rules they have, offensive and defensive abilities, what kind of role they fill, and whether that's absolutely necessary for your army in order to field these. How well does it line up with the computer game? And then finally answering the also critical question, should you spend some of your hard-earned cash to buy more of these? And so to start off with, when looking at the Marauder, a couple things we notice. It feels substantial and beefy, right? I mean, we're sitting on 5 hit points. You see with the kinetic foam upgrade, it can get up to 6 hit points, which is really nice. You've got an armor value that starts at 4+, but if they're upgraded with that passive ability, the Veteran of Tarsonis, then as long as they're within range of an objective, then their armor value is improved by 1, so it goes to a 3+, which I mentioned in the Roach video. Check out the Roach video if you haven't seen it yet. That in the Roach video, I suspect 3+ is one of the best armor saves we're going to see in this game, only because if you go to a 2+, it's just going to be too hard to be able to remove stuff. So I just kind of anticipate 3+ is going to be one of the highest versions we're ever going to see. They don't have a great evade save. Then again, I'm not sure how often you'll even be able to trigger an evade save. These guys don't get a combat shield like the Marines do. They're frankly quite big, quite bulky, so it's not surprising they have a particularly bad evade save. So the fact they have that armor save is really nice. They are slightly slower than your average Marine and Zergling and such. Again, Speed 4 is not bad, right? I mean, that's on par with the Roach. It's the kind of thing we would expect, and it holds up with what's present in the game. And the size is, again, kind of the size of standard everyday people, right, in the game. It's the size of our Marines. It's the size of our Marauders. The Roaches, I anticipate the Zealots will probably also be size 2, which is great. And then we've got this breakdown. You can buy them as a model set of 2, or you can buy them as a bigger squad of up to 4. And you can see that your supply level for them scales down based on how many of them you have, which is really nice. And so on the whole, this is a really good starting stat line. It's a good start, right? Especially for a heavy, right, that you can use, even though, as you notice from the tags down at the bottom left-hand side, this is a core unit, so you can field quite a few of these if you really want to. In the movement phase, you get the stim pack ability, which we saw before on the Marines. So you can take up to 3 hits of non-lethal damage, so it'll never finish off any of your men. You won't be removing any of your models in order to get a bonus from this. And it means potentially you may not suffer 3 wounds, actually, right? Depending on how many non-lethal wounds you have left to spare. Though, admittedly, if you have less than 3 left to spare, you are running pretty short on this unit, and they won't be long for this world. And the unit gains an extra 2 inches worth of movement if you do use the stim pack, and the quad K12 gains precision 3, which I'm led to believe from the comments that I received on last video, means that you can convert 3 misses into hits, which does make you a lot more reliable from a damage perspective, especially since, as we look down at the assault phase, the quad K12 that they have hits on a 4+. This is worse than the Marines. It is worse than the Roaches that we've looked at so far. They do get 3 attacks each. So you're looking at anywhere from 3 to 12 attacks, which is really nice, depending on how many models you have in the unit. Starts with a range of 12, but if you get the ultra capacitors, they can have a long range of 16 inches, which is not horrible. It also says target all, which I anticipate will be adjusted, because target all means it can hit both ground units and air units. And in the game, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe they can only target ground units, which is one of the benefits of Marines. It also has Pierce 1 armored, so effectively it allows them to slip 1, I believe, past armor saves, which is nice. And it does have the Surge Armored D3+1 trait. So against armored targets, out of all the hits that they do, D3+1 of them will avoid evade saves, which is quite nice. And then they have a concussion ability, the concussive shells, where as a reaction to an enemy declaring a charge against a friendly unit within 6 inches, then the enemy gains debuff speed 3. Now, this is actually a pretty powerful ability, and a reason on its own, I think, for potentially running these is from a board control perspective, this is really good because of the order of operations currently present in this text. It says when an enemy declares a charge against a friendly unit, which means the opponent has to first trigger this, and it doesn't state within range of the quad K-12. So let's say, for example, you've got a 4-man squad of Marauders, and then you've got a 9-man squad of Marines, and then like even further to the side, call it like 6 inches away, you've got a squad of Zerglings. And so the squad of Zerglings could be easily 18 inches or even more away from the nearest Marauder. What it doesn't state is that the assaulting unit has to be in range of the quad K-12. They just have to be within 6 inches of a unit, a friendly unit that is being charged. So you could run other units, snaking them along really far, and suddenly have a zone of control, effectively, of board control, where you're readying that reaction with your 1 CP. And if the enemy declares a charge, you just say, okay, well, you were only like, call it 6 inches away from the Marines. You would need like a 2+ in order to succeed on the charge. Well, now that 2+, because we're going to -3, is going to become a 5+. You could see a lot of failed charges if you have Marauders just dotting along the battlefield, helping to protect your Marines, your siege tanks, things like that. Anything that will cause them to fail to get into close combat and thus not be able to use those combat phase abilities, which assaulting units tend to really, really want. That tends to be their strongest suit. Anything like that is just going to save you lives. It's going to keep your models on the table for an awful lot longer. On its own, that might be a reason to go pretty heavy into Marauder. Okay, just on its own. And then finally, in the combat phase, we have 2 attacks on a 4+ doing a damage of 1. This is different, by the way, from the Eschenspiel card. So the card at Eschen that first came out, you'll notice that in the combat phase, everything else pretty much about the card is more or less the same, except that concussive shells used to be an active ability you would use in the move phase to slow people down. You wouldn't be able to use it as a reaction to an attack, which technically might have a little more utility to it. It was only in debuff speed 2. But it meant you could kind of slow people down even on approach. So now that might deter charges in the first place because they're just out of position a little more. But otherwise, most everything remains the same, which is fine. The big thing here is that in that combat section, you'll notice they used to only have the 1 attack on a 4+, but they would do 2 damage with each one of them. I personally like the latter, and the only reason why, whoops, wrong way in the slides, is that if I only have 1 strike looking for 4s, even if it has the chance of doing twice as much damage, the chance that it misses or it hits and then it's armor saved so it doesn't do anything is a good bit higher than if I have 2 chances to sneak something in with a hit, because on average, of course, only one of them is hitting. And then, yes, they have an armor save, but I might be able to slip that one through and do at least a little bit of damage and chip away at a unit rather than what it was before, which was really a lot more swingy and a lot more of a gambit. Right. And since, again, this might be the kind of unit you might only be running 2 of, since there's only 2 that comes, for example, in the Founders Edition starter set, only having 2 attacks in close combat versus 4 is a big difference. Okay. And so I'm a fan of that change. I think it's okay. Again, I feel like it's not overpowered. It's fine. There's no surge component. So the opponent will get full evade saves and armor saves against everything. Of course, evade saves are relatively rare in close combat, unless it's like a Burrowed Zerg or something like that. But still, like, the fact that, there's no surge, you're able to, kind of do something against the enemy, and the opponent still gets an armor save against all of them. I think that that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. On the whole, I like this. I think this is, everything that I think of when I think Marauders has been worked in here somewhere. Obviously, concussive shells isn't just affecting any movement. It's specifically charge movement, but that's not necessarily bad. And I think, if anything, it does provide a very interesting tactical gameplay, which a unit like this might not normally lend itself to. This could just be, well, this is your way of dealing with armor. But it's how you deal with armor, but also a way to slow down, potentially, really light targets as well. So it has a very interesting tactical play. When going into the movement phase and looking at offensive abilities, of course, the big thing here is Stimpak, right? Stimpak is going to make it so that you're a lot more likely to both get to a position where you need to be in range or get a little bit of extra distance before somebody tries to charge you, to kind of maintain that skirmish profile that this unit is clearly built for. And of course, getting the ability to convert misses into hits in at a ranged format, which is really nice. The assault phase is where this guy is really going to shine, mostly because they don't have the greatest volume, but they have really good damage for the volume that they have because, well, they're only getting somewhere between 3 to 12 shots, which is a good bit less than the Marines. And it's hitting on a 4+ instead of a 3+, which the Marines get. At a 12 to 16 inch range instead of a 12 to 18 inch range, it has a surge against armor, so it'll be more reliable at helping you to remove roaches, stalkers. I suspect sentries are going to be light targets. That's my guess, not armored, because I believe in the RTS game they are light targets. But I mean, obviously, I'm anticipating when we get the classic ground units, very good chance all of those will be armored. Very good chance. And at a D3+1, that's 2 to 4 of your hits that are sliding past evades and going straight to armor, which is quite nice. And every hit you do is doing damage 2 instead of damage 1. So I think the Marine still has a place, especially if the target all gets changed to only target ground, which I suspect it will. In as much as that's the case, the Marine will be your anti-air defense. It will also be just large volume of fire, large number of bodies, even if the larger number of bodies has less wounds between them all. Whereas the Marauder will be more of a, well, here's your beefy, tanky, survivable unit that can take a punishment and can dish out a punishment and provide you with some board control and especially punish enemy armor, which is really nice to have, as a compliment. Combat phase is pretty darn bad. I don't want to say it's the worst in the game because there are some other units we haven't seen yet. And as we mentioned in the Marine video, I suspect there might be units like, say, the Siege Tank that might not get any close combat attack at all, right? So, it's possible that the only thing they might get to do is say, like, go out of siege mode or get into siege mode, right? Or something like that. And so because of that, like, it's not great. 2 to 8 attacks, 4+ damage 1 means that even past a 4+ armor save, you're only doing like 2 wounds, which is not much. So there's that. So in general, if you're looking for a good base for range damage, especially high impact range damage with a higher damage amount for every wound you slip through, then I think the Marauder is going to be a really good choice. Defensively is actually where I think the Marauder is going to do even better, especially depending on how you kit it out and how you work around it. Stimpack does make you faster. It does technically make you slightly more vulnerable, though you have quite a few wounds to spare, right? I mean, if each of your models has 5 to 6 wounds and you've got 4 of them, and so you got 24 wounds, losing 3 to get more reliable damage going to the opponent, especially when you look at something as swingy as a 4+, is probably worth it at least twice, possibly more, and more on that when we look at the medic, right? And so in general, I tend to think in the movement phase, it's actually probably worth it to stim at least a couple times. And then for the assault phase, you want to be able to use your concussive shells on charges that need to be stopped while also, of course, pounding the enemy down with damage. But that assault phase concussive shell is a nice defensive ability because it's going to make it so that people who would be doing damage in the combat phase, they run a bigger risk. They might not do it, right? And since the enemy has to declare that they're charging before you declare whether you're using concussive shells against them, because that's the trigger that triggers the reaction, you have the ability to kind of dissuade the enemy from maybe declaring certain charges because they're like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to be the one to trigger the charge with this unit. I think I'd rather charge with these other units, and maybe you just let them go because, the little Zerglings, maybe they got like 8 Zerglings going up against like 9 Marines. You might actually do okay with the 9 Marines, possibly. And so you might just say, well, I'm just going to let that one go. And you're kind of holding that reaction for concussive shells for when something really big and really dangerous comes in, and it can really dissuade your opponent. It can really cause trouble down the line, right? And then the combat phase, they are pretty vulnerable there, right? So just be really careful, especially if you've been stim packing a lot and you don't have a lot of wounds remaining. You don't want to suddenly find that you're losing a whole lot of Marauders all at once, okay? So in general, I think these guys tend to be in more of a skirmish role. In the move phase, stim if you want to, but most importantly, move to make sure that you've got a good bit of distance so they can't be easily charged, while still maybe being in range of objectives, because again, if it's an objective-based game, you do need to hold it, okay? That is important. Hammer away at them with your main attack. Use your concussive shells to slow down combats and make sure that people who would charge may otherwise fail. Obviously, if they roll 6s, there's just so much you can do about that, right? There's nothing more that one can do in that regard. And then in the combat phase, weather what you have to, right? Just in general. But I think in general, that's kind of the way you may want to use these. And so they're going to fulfill an anti-ground, anti-armor role currently, I guess, and all areas, surface to ground, anti-armor roll, well, surface to air anti-armor roll, and because of the stim packs, you can get pretty reliable hits, right? Because I mean, if you're rolling 12, on average, 6 of them are going to hit. Precision 3 would make it 9 hits. That's not bad at all, right? I mean, that's sneaking 2 of those hits, 3 of those hits past the best of armor saves, right? Depending on how close to median you end up rolling, which is 6 damage, which is a lot. Okay, that is a lot. And so in general, I think that's a really, really good baseline, especially if you're to be able to build on with other things like Marines. It's going to provide board control against charges, which is really, really powerful against melee-centric armies. Obviously, if you're facing, maybe somebody like me who's leaning more like Roach Hydralisk when it comes to, Zerg, and a little less on the Zerglings, because that's also in conjunction with how I tend to play StarCraft 2 when I'm playing online. It may matter a little less because I will probably not be doing too many charges, all things considered. But it does mean that for armies that do end up doing that, and that is going to be a whole thing. People love their Zealots. People love their Zerglings. It can be a really, really nice add in that regard. It is a very durable objective holder. Not only are you getting potentially that 6 wound if you take the upgrade for kinetic foam, you're also getting a 3+ armor save, which is really, really nice for making sure that those 24 wounds or 12 wounds or whatever is going to last an awful lot longer. And so, and because of the fact that you can slow down charges while pounding away at enemy units, the reasonable range that you have at 12 to 16 inches is pretty good for what you'll need it to do, right? You will be pretty good at pounding away at enemies who would otherwise want to take the objective. It's not like you're going to be sitting there just getting the stuffing kicked out of you and the enemy's out of range, so you can't do anything about them, right? That is until I imagine siege tanks are going to have a longer range. I anticipate that there will be other, kind of assault style units. I don't know if we're ever going to get a Tempest, just because of how big they are by comparison. But, since it's a flyer, maybe we pretend like it's higher up so we can get away with it looking a little bit smaller, a little bit out of scale, as a kind of a forced, perspective sort of thing. But we'll see. It does have less volume and versatility than the Marines. So, and that's actually a healthy thing in my mind, because I don't want to see Marines just disappear. Right? I mean, I want the aesthetic of StarCraft 2, and for people who really love StarCraft 1 and want to just recreate StarCraft 1, so maybe they leave the Marauders at home. I don't want them to feel like they're leaving their best choice at home and having to take the second violin, right, to do this stuff. I think both of these guys play really well, and they'll play really, really well alongside each other, and especially alongside stuff like the Medic, which we'll talk about in a future video. And so, does this match the game? Well, first of all, in terms of look and appearance, I mean, it looks pretty close, right? I know some people complained about, oh, it looks more like a Fire Bat than it does Marauder. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't zoom in very often when I'm playing the game, so like it looks close enough for me. I don't personally have a problem with it in terms of how it looks. I think it looks great. It is a very cheap anti-armor unit. It's going to require less setup than a siege tank. So even when siege tanks do end up arriving, because we've already kind of seen that they've clearly been working on a model for it. And I anticipate that might be that classic ground unit that's coming near the end of the year. Even if that's the case, like, I still think the Marauder might still have a place, because it's just easier to use, frankly, right? Because in order to get the really powerful hits, you just walk them up in the move phase and you start pounding away in the assault phase, and you even have some board control. Whereas the siege tank, you got to move it, and then you got to set it up, and then you got to hope the enemy stays in range, and then you got to potentially unsiege it, and then keep moving it on, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into siege tank micro that you don't have to do with Marauders, right? It also does allow for a barracks only build. So if you want to be one of those guys who's basically doing the old, 3 racks, 5 racks, 8 racks, whatever it is, your barracks count for running armies, you can do that. And the Marauder would give you the ability to say, hey, we do have a way to be able to punch up against armored vehicles and against armored creatures, which is really nice. And they are very effective in large numbers, especially with Stimpack, which is accurate to the game. And so, yeah, I think it holds up. This is a very faithful rendition. Obviously, concussion shells not being able to hit people who are just strafing and running away from you to try to get to an objective is a thing. It only affects charges. I think it's fine. If anything, it might even be more useful there, because it clearly clarifies when the speed debuff actually happens. So I think that's okay. And while it means that one aspect of the game doesn't quite translate over, there are always going to be things that don't translate over when you change the medium. And so should you buy this thing? I think yes, for 2 reasons. Number one, only 2 of them come in the starter set. As far as we can tell from the pictures that were released showing us everything that's in the starter set, Only two of them exist, and I think this is going to be one of those units that's going to be a lot better when you run it with 4 people instead of 2 people. It is going to be more expensive, but it means that that durable base is going to be better. Your rate of attacks is going to be an awful lot better, which makes everything an awful lot more reliable, and it makes Stimpack hurt a lot less. So, in my opinion, if I'm running Marauders, 9 times out of 10 probably, I'm probably going to be running this as a bigger, bulkier unit because they're really cool. They look awesome. And I'm a huge fan of that. But also because I think it will make them a little more reliable at actually punishing armor instead of just chipping away a few wounds at a time. I am also of the mind, I think the barracks upgrade is going to be absolutely necessary on these. I'm not of the mind you need them for every single unit so far that we've seen. But I think they will come in extremely handy on these guys because while you'll still have the concussive shells and you'll still have Stimpack, you'll be losing, you know, what is that, a sixth of your wounds? You know, you're basically going down by about, what's that, 16%, 20%, however you want to run the math, on your wound count. Your armor save is potentially worse. You know, you won't have the extra range, so you might be able to sit on objectives, but enemies might be able to outrange you. And so you're forced to either take advantage of that better armor save or try to be able to punch back at units that are hitting you. All of that seems bad to me. I don't like that. So in general, I would probably opt for the barracks upgrade on these guys literally every time. It is a core unit, so technically you could run like all Marauders, probably, which would be cool. I don't think it's strong, but I think it's very cool, which is fun because, you know, that's the one thing, right? In any game where they limit the types of slots you can get and how much of something you can run, on the one hand, it is probably better than somebody showing up who's a pro player who's playing with like all siege tanks or all Goliaths, right, or something like that, and the other guy's running a more natural army. He's just getting the snot kicked out of him early on. There's not much you can do about it. I feel like it is more fair to have the slot things, but the fact that these guys are core means you can slot them into pretty much anything you want, which is awesome. It comes in the starter set, so it is very easy to acquire, admittedly, from what it seems, 2 at a time, so keep that in mind. And again, just like aesthetically, like it's really cool, right? I mean, guy with gun in general is awesome. Guy with 2 hands using grenade launchers is just really cool. And I gotta say, the voice actor for the Marauder in StarCraft 2 is one of my favorite out of everybody. The guy is he's just full send for the boys. It's so good. So in general, my recommendation is pick them up. I am almost certainly going to pick up an extra set, possibly 2, when the pre-orders start, because we've been confirmed that the other kits are going to be available alongside the starter sets. I'm stoked to use these guys. I think these guys are going to be a really nice addition. I think they're going to fill a very useful role, especially with Wave 1 rolling out, and so the Stalker is coming out, and you know, while they won't be quite as useful against the Hydralisk because the Hydralisks aren't armored, at the same time, if you can slip some of those damage 2 hits past the armor save, which Hydralisks are not that good at, more on that in a future video, I think it'll still hurt. You know, I mean, I think it'll still do the job, and that's great. And so I have high hopes that this unit's going to be one of those cool options that everybody will have in their collection. They'll be thinking, okay, this could be an interesting choice. Do I want this or do I want other stuff? Because I don't want units to be antiquated as we go along. And in general, I think it's nicely positioned to be in a useful place, but not an auto-include that will keep people from picking up stuff in the future, like, for example, Goliaths and tanks. But what do you think? Do you think that the Goliath is too powerful in its current format? Maybe its rate of attacks is too high to reflect the fact, because, I mean, it actually has a higher rate of attacks than the Marines have. And in the game, Marines do fire faster than these guys. Do you think that maybe they're too weak and that as the siege tank rolls out, we're going to start seeing these guys off of the production line entirely? Let us know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.